Well, I've been putting this off for a while, and I don't really know why. And what it is a record of my wife's last few days, last 10 days or so. Last thing she said, last thing she did. When I first started thinking about this, I really thought it was like the last week of her life. But upon reflection and remembering when things happened and when people came over and when people visited, it was actually a little bit longer, maybe the last 12, 13, 14 days of her life. I think by the last week of her life, she was nearly unresponsive. I say nearly unresponsive because there were still times where she could kind of shake her head yes and shake her head no, and she made sounds of emotion and about things she wanted even up until the last day of her life. But for the most part, she was just not with us, sleeping most of the time, eyes closed, took every bit of her strength to even, shake her head yes and no. So I just want to say, first of all, I don't know if you're watching this or not watching this, and who's watching this. This is really for me to talk about her last week on earth, her last 12, 15 days before she went to visit the Lord. Fortunate to visit, but to go home with the Lord. So it really starts with her last meal. Her last meal was a hot dog, and she ate the whole thing. And we were really surprised that she had eaten the whole thing because she wasn't eating that much. As you know, people who have cancer, they don't get very hungry and they stop eating. And she had been like that. She'd just been picking at things before and not really finishing any meals, and she just couldn't eat anything. And so it was very interesting that she ate a whole hot dog, and it was a fairly healthy size hot dog. It wasn't just like one of the little skinny ones. It was like a big one, and we were all very surprised. And that was the last thing she ate. A couple things after that, she would have like these otter pops, except for they were special ones. They had vitamins in it and stuff. Vitamins in these otter pops. I don't know who exactly made them. I think it was Pedialyte, something like that. So they had electrolytes and stuff in them. The next day she had like one of those, and then the next day after that she had like a half of one, and that's when things kind of really went downhill. Was after that, after she stopped eating. And she would still drink from time to time. She would drink out of a straw, and this is where things get difficult. So she stopped talking as much, and I just want this on record. I just want to say what happened with her, what her last words were, what her last emotions were, what her last thing, how it unfolded. And I know that, if you're watching this, I've probably told you this on a more personal level, but I just wanted it, recorded somewhere. So I wasn't there for this, but apparently she told Leslie, my stepdaughter, her daughter, she just handed her something invisible, and she says, "I'm not going to need this anymore." And Leslie took it and was like, "Okay, I'll take that for you. It's no problem." And then about a day or two before she went totally silent, completely 100% no words, but she would still, talk or whatever. She would still not talk, but, make sounds and shake her head yes and no. About a couple days before that, she told me, she goes, "I'm not going to be able to articulate for long." And I said, "What?" And she goes, "I'm not going to be able to articulate for long." I said, "Well, that's pretty good, honey. That's a pretty big word there, articulate, for somebody who's slowing down the way you're slowing down." I didn't say that, but I said, "That's pretty good, hon." And then I said, "But don't worry." I said, "Don't worry." I said, "We'll figure it out. I'll figure out what you want. I'll figure out what you need. I'll figure it out." And then that happened on the same day before that, like a day before that. I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. A day before that is when she asked for the peppermint schnapps. And it was in the evening, and she looked up at me and she goes, "How about some peppermint schnapps?" And we didn't have any, and it was late, it was dark out. And I was thinking of going to the store to get some, but Leslie had some peppermint oil and some sugar and some water, and so we mixed it together and gave it to her. And she took about a sip of it, and that was about it. This is for her. This is some peppermint schnapps. Thank you, Joyce. Love you. That's the real thing right there. I'm not much of a drinker. I'm sorry if you're seeing this and you're thinking, oh, he's a pastor. Yeah, I'm not part of the dry clergy, okay? So, go. I was going to say something bad, but I shouldn't. Anyway, so then the next day, it was either the next day or the day after that, is when she said, "I'm not going to be able to articulate for long." And I was just like, "Okay, honey, it's okay." And the very last thing that she said is she looked at me and she says, "I'm not going to be able to," she said, "There's not enough food for everybody. I'm not going to be able to get enough food for everybody." I wish I could remember the exact words. "I'm not going to be able to get enough food for everybody." I said, "It's all right, hon. Don't worry. We'll get it." That was the last thing she ever said. And at that point, she just went kind of, she just sat and have her eyes closed and lay back and couldn't, she could go yes and no. The next day after that was kind of a sad day because she was still taking stuff. And she had this, I gave her some medication, and it was in liquid form. She had this big cup with this big straw, and she was trying to suck the water up, and she couldn't suck the water out. And I was just like, crap. And so I got a small straw, and I put it in another cup, but the straw was wiggly, and she couldn't get it in her mouth. And I was like, oh no. And I'm like, okay. And so I tried to get it to her mouth, but by that time she was so tired, she couldn't get any water, and that was the last water she had. And so she didn't have any water after that other than what we could drizzle down her mouth and swab with a swab. And she didn't want that done. She was like, "I don't want that done." She told us that before. She was like, because she could still go yes and no for a couple days after that. And in the morning, because she would sleep, and then in the morning she could feel those last few days. In the morning, she was still well enough to shake her head yes and no and make some basic sounds. And but by, mid-morning, she was gone. She was just laying there. And if you've seen the Instagram page, it's remembering_Joyce_Carlin on Instagram if you want to follow it. And there's a picture of her there, and it's that's her last day, but she looked like that for a while. Sorry, lost my train of thought. So the next few days, we just had people come over and visit and everything. And, it was just kind of yes and no. So I guess what I was saying is in the morning, she could still say yes and no, but by the mid-afternoon, but by mid-morning, she was gone. She would just lay there and kind of open mouth and sunken eyes and just look bad. And it was just horrible. So, but she was still kind of responsive. Anyway, that went on for a while. Wasn't really drinking, wasn't eating, was barely drinking, just what we could get down her, and with her medications and stuff. And her medications were sparse. I actually probably should have done more of her medications. Now that I reflect upon it, I feel bad about that. But the night before she died, we had a nurse come over and change her. And we thought she was going to die that night because she had presented with a Kennedy sore. And what a Kennedy sore is a sore on your body that goes necrotic very quickly. And the reason it goes necrotic very quickly is it's a sign that your body's shutting down. And so we thought she was going to die actually the night before. And so she had been on the couch in a lounge chair. That's kind of where she wanted to be. And so Leslie and I slept next to her on the couch. I slept on the couch. Leslie slept in the other lounge chair. And that whole night, we thought it was really the last night. So we kept getting up anytime she needed something. We really thought it was the last night, because once you present with a Kennedy sore, you really have within 24 hours to live. But like most things, she outlived that. She was just a strong woman. She outlived a lot. All the doctors thought she was going to be dead like a long time ago. And she survived, 3.5 years after stage 4 diagnosis. And 3 months after they gave her only 2 months to live. So she just was a fighter. So that night after she presented with the Kennedy sore, we were up all night because we really thought it was the last night. We wanted her not to have any problems. So anytime she'd make a little bit of a sound, we would get up. And Leslie and I just didn't have any sleep whatsoever. And so we were exhausted the next day. And the next day is the day she died, the next night. Before she died, in the afternoon, a girl who's like our daughter to us, her name's Danielle, she was able to call her. And Joyce made this sound, this elation, just if I could imitate. She was like, ah, she knew it was her. I said, honey, it's Danielle. So she was still cognitive to some degree. And Danielle talked to her, said, you're going to be with Jesus soon, Mom. I love you. I wish I could be there. And that was she was filled with joy that night. But given that we didn't get any sleep that night, nor any sleep that day, that night that she died, we were just exhausted. And to make matters worse, Leslie was sick. And Leslie was sick to the point where she was throwing up. She was coughing to the point where she would actually make her throw up. And Joyce heard this and was whining. And so she knew very well that Leslie was sick. And I was so exhausted. And I know I was just laying on the couch and I should have gotten up. I wanted to get up and tell her, hey, it's okay. And the last thing I told her, I said, honey, I'm going to take care of her. I said, you don't have to worry. I'm going to take care of her. And that settled her down. And this was June the 14th. Leslie came out of the bathroom after throwing up and said, explained to her mom, look, I'm just sick. It's okay. I'm all right. Because we could tell she was not happy about this. You could hear her still. She was just not happy about it. And she seemed fine. And then about 3 minutes before midnight on the 14th, because we were expecting her to die the night before, so it was a sure thing she was going to die that night, but we were just all exhausted and laying around, so we couldn't attend to her as much. Leslie was a little bit more awake than I was. And she just let out this sigh. Sounded something like this. And we thought she needed something. So we were like, what do you need? Are you okay? And we realized she was not breathing. And we turned on the lights and we looked, and yeah, sure enough, she wasn't breathing. Called the nurse, and the nurse came over, and 15 minutes after midnight on the 15th, pronounced her dead. And one thing I forgot, she would do stuff with her hands. On that day that she said, before she mentioned her last words, which was, I'm not going to have enough food for everybody. And it was after she said, I'm not going to be able to articulate for long. She did this. She would do this with her hands a lot. And I don't know what it meant. I don't know what she was doing. The reason why I say all this, and I'm going to bring this to a close real soon, is that last week has just haunted me. I ruminate on it. I've ruminated on it less this last couple weeks than I did like from the time she'd passed, like all I could do is think about like her last words. I could think about her last movement. I couldn't stop thinking about her last, the last sound she made. And it was very haunting. And somebody asked me, was like, well, do you have any regrets about it or something like that? I'm like, no. I mean, listen, I don't have any regrets as far as the way I treated her. I mean, I treated her absolutely like a total queen. I mean, I was, I don't mean to pat myself on the back. I really don't, but it was really husband of the year kind of material. I mean, I was there for everything, for every doctor visit, for every chemo, for every vitamin C download, for everything. I was with her. So I don't know. It's just for some reason, it just can't stop thinking about it. This last couple of weeks, it hasn't hit me as hard. It hasn't been as at the forefront of my mind, but boy, since she died, like for some reason, I couldn't stop thinking about her last week. I just couldn't stop thinking about it. I couldn't stop thinking about the way she looked, the last thing she ate, the way she looked when she died, the last thing she said, the noise she made when our daughter called. I just couldn't stop thinking about it. So maybe this will help a little, I don't know. But any life living is a life worth remembering. And I don't know who will remember it. You get one generation, maybe two, maybe three generations at the most. At the most, you get 3 generations. And because your kids will remember, and maybe your grandkids will remember. But that's it. I mean, you might remember your great-grandmother, but you don't remember your great-great-grandmother or great-great-grandfather. You may have heard stories, but you don't really remember. So I just wanted this recorded somewhere. All right, that's it for me. This took on a lot longer than I thought it was going to take. A lot of pauses, a lot of ruminating, a lot of thinking. All right, we'll see you around. Bye.